Are blockading countries using mosques to spread hate speech against Qatar? Clerics in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt are praising the isolation of their neighbor. The Qatari government says it's being defamed. What are the long-term ramifications of using religion in a political conflict? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. The diplomatic push to try and defuse the political stalemate in the Gulf is picking up pace. Britain's Foreign Secretary is in the region to urge all parties to support mediation efforts to end the blockade of Qatar. Boris Johnson has already visited Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and is also due in the UAE and the Qatari capital. The US Secretary of State is due in Kuwait on Monday after Washington voiced its concern at what it calls the impasse in Gulf relations, which could drag on for months. Qatar has been warned of further unspecified action after a deadline expired to meet 13 demands, including cutting links with Iran and shutting Al Jazeera. Diplomats from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt met in Cairo on Wednesday to discuss their dispute. The Qatari Foreign Ministry says it regrets their statements and added false accusations amount to defamation in contradiction with established foundations of international relations. Qatar's position on terrorism is consistent and known for its rejection and condemnation of all forms of terrorism, whatever the causes and motives. Qatar is an active member committed to international conventions in combating terrorism and is financing at regional and international levels. Religion appears to be playing a part. During the holy month of Ramadan in June, State TV in Saudi Arabia broadcast prayers by cleric Abdurrahman al-Sudais, which included comments about terrorist funders. Social media activists say that he was alluding to Qatar. Other videos and Twitter feeds of Saudi clerics were circulated online in what appears to be a mobilization campaign against Qatar. Some clerics in Egypt and the UAE also have been supporting the Qatari blockade. Others have criticized Qatar's role in Libya and Yemen and accused the Gulf state of funding terrorism, which officials in Doha strongly deny. Let's bring in our guest here with me in the studio, Youcef Bouandel. He's Professor of International Affairs at Qatar University. From Manila via Skype is James Dorsey, Senior Fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Singapore's Nanyang Technological University. And from London, Shahid Qureshi, who is the editor of the London Post, which is a London-based online news website. Welcome to you all. Let me start by asking you, Dr. Youcef Bouandel, about the use of religion in a political standoff. Is this something which is very common in the region, and why using and manipulating religion in such a context?
Well, everybody knows the importance of religion in the daily lives of people in the Middle East, and the use of religion in this particular case is aimed at conferring some legitimacy on the actions taken by the three governments in the GCC and that of Egypt. And it's one way of gathering public opinion that whatever the governments in those countries are doing is right.
Let's bring in James Dorsey in Manila. Mr. Dorsey, why is religion being used to a great extent in this conflict? Do you believe this is an attempt to try to consolidate a political position in a conflict where the general sentiment does not seem to be really in favor of?
What I think that you're seeing is several things. One is, as Youcef already said earlier, religion is frequently used in multiple conflicts in the Middle East, most notably in the Saudi-Iranian rivalry, where you have a very strong sectarian argument being used. I think what you're seeing in the case of Qatar is less the use of religion as such, as much more the use of religious figures to endorse government positions. And you're seeing that in countries where you have religious institutions and religious figures who are in ways dependent on the government.
Let's include Mr. Shahid Qureshi in London. Mr. Shahid, Youcef and Dorsey say that basically the use of religion has been in this particular context to try to advance a political agenda. What could be the ramification of this use in this particular conflict?
Well, it's a very important question, but as my colleague has just mentioned, the Iranian and Saudi concerns about the use of religion. I mean, Iranians are using their Vilayat-e-Faqih to export their version of Islam in all the Muslim countries, including Pakistan, including Iraq, including Bahrain, Syria, Saudi Arabia. They seem to have taken over all the Shias from all the countries, and they seem to be running them. And as we speak, there is an operation going on in Parachinar in Pakistan against those Shia militias which were trained by the Iranians, and they were fighting in, with the Assad regime against the ISIS. Now, we're coming to the Qatar's role into this whole conflict. Qatar has been providing some intellectual support and some support to the charitable work, which is not to be construed as the support to the terrorism. Terrorism is a defined word, is a very vague word at the moment. I mean, there are states involved in terrorism and there are individuals involved in terrorism. And we need to understand that who is using religion for their political purposes. And I said it in the parliament a few days ago. There seems to be, there's an impression that the US is supporting Iran secretly, that on the one hand they have eliminated Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and on the other hand they eliminated Taliban on the other side. And and on the other hand, they have provided a safe corridor to the Iranians to go into Syria and fight with the Assad forces against the IS.
Mr. Bouandel, now we're talking about hate speech that has been used again and again in this crisis. But is this something that could potentially undermine the chances of a political solution to this crisis?
Well, I think for the time being, it will escalate the crisis, but I believe that the political moves towards resolving the crisis are one step, and the religious speeches are the other. Whilst we have been hearing calls from different quarters for a peaceful solution based on negotiations, and like you mentioned earlier in your program, that Boris Johnson is in the region. The blockading states are just using these particular speeches in order to drum up support for their actions. I do believe that this will have negative effects on the overall situations, at least vis-à-vis religion as opposed to the political process, because these particular religious figures are playing in the hands of their governments. So many people have been refused to Umrah during the holy month of Ramadan. We don't know what will happen in terms of Hajj, as many people from Qatar, if the situation continues, will not be able to go to Hajj. And there will be questions regarding even the holy sites, whether they should be under Saudi Arabia or they should be under international Muslim agencies. So if as a Muslim, I hear it in so many corners that I do not necessarily need a visa from Saudi Arabia to go to Mecca. Hajj, or people who go to Hajj, are called the guests of God, Youcef Rahman.
I see your point. Mr. Dorsey, the French newspaper Le Monde revealed about a few weeks ago that Saudi Arabia has been approaching countries in Africa, Muslim countries, warning them against denying them access to the Hajj unless they sever ties with Qatar. The use of religion as a political tool in diplomacy, is this something which is unprecedented or very common in this part of the world?
I certainly don't think it's unprecedented. Religion is a very important factor in political and public life in the Middle East. What I do think is, and I think that's on a much broader point, what you've seen, among other things with the approaches in Africa, where indeed financial aid as well as the quotas for the Hajj have been used as pressure points, is that in many ways it's failed. So with other words, what you've seen in Africa is that there are, and that's what the Le Monde story was saying, that the Saudis approached 6 nations. Mm-hmm. Of those 6 nations, only 1 broke off relations with Qatar. The others lowered their
Mr. Qureshi, you've been talking earlier about a region that is marred by sectarian divide, animosities, religious divide. What is the way out from this? An implementation of a new reform that puts aside the use of hate speech and religion in a standoff?
What needs to happen is that there needs to be a new narrative needs to be drawn now, because the Persian, the Iranians and the Arabs are fighting their historical battles, pre-Islamic battles. And I was reading the comments by some Iranian generals by restoring the Persian Empire, starting from Mosul to, and they're working on on that model basically. And all the groups who are fighting in, for example, in Syria and in Iraq and in Lebanon, they are fighting on that model. Now, we seems to be happening only blaming, or we're only talking about the Sunni elements in the war who are involved into this. And yes, the religion has an important role, but we need to also understand, for example, in Ukraine, soldiers are taking their guns for blessings in churches, and churches are blessing tanks. And this is the use of religion is not limited to Islam only. Mm-hmm. The other forces, for example, the Russian forces coming into Syria, they are having their own blessings from the Russian Orthodox Church. They have all their religious connotations.
You're talking about a conflict.
You're asking me what is the way out for?
Go ahead.
You're asking about the way out of it. The way out of it, and as I said to the Iranians on their channels, that you need to come up with a political solution, and political solutions beyond religious tilt.
All right.
Because if you go into the religious,
political solutions could take ages. Mr. Bouandel, do you think that we should start, first of all, with a tough legislation that bans the use of religion and hate speech in the Muslim world?
Well, I mean, the person or the people who are, or the party that is going to ban those particular things are the very same party that are using it for their political objectives. So I do believe that maybe the main objective would be for the religious establishment to be completely independent of the state, like it used to be in the early days. So if it is completely independent and scholars are free to say whatever they like, they will have only one reference, which is the religion. But once they are being ordered by the political establishment, then it becomes very, very difficult. So I believe that I do believe that if there would be any gains in the political process, then these hatred attacks will slow down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Mr. Dorsey. Mr. Dorsey, we know about the...
Can I just add something?
Very quickly, please, Mr. Qureshi, if you don't...
I will just add that 2 weeks ago, I met the ambassador of Iran in Kazakhstan, and I clearly said to him, I said, you cannot have peace with Arabs because you are promoting the murderer of the second Caliph Umar, Abu Lulu Firoz, as your hero. So one party's terrorist is other party's hero. How we find a solution, peaceful solution between the two nations, between the two regions, and they need to come up with these kind of things. These kind of provocations will not get us anywhere, and these things needs to be resolved once for and all. And I agree that the religion should not play a role into the state affairs, the political affairs. But we need to look at the economy, education.
We'll go to those details later. Mr. Dorsey, now we're talking about how to move forward, the need to implement a legislation, but we know about the connection between the political establishment and the religious establishment in Saudi Arabia that has been going on for quite some generations. Is it easy for the political establishment in Saudi Arabia to put more pressure on the religious establishment to set aside those things, particularly the use of religion and hate speech?
Let me make a more general point with respect to my two colleagues on this show. I think we've got to realize we are dealing across the board with political conflicts. We are not dealing with religious conflicts. We are dealing with religion being used in political conflicts. Now, the idea that you can separate religion and politics is, I think, an illusion. First of all, the intermingling of religion and politics is not an exclusively Islamic issue. It's an issue in Israel. It's an issue in secular democracies. And those are the way those political systems work. Saudi Arabia obviously is a special case because Saudi Arabia has a power sharing agreement from the very beginning of the founding of the state between the ruling family and the religious establishment. That balance of power is still in many ways or is regularly being sorted out. And one of the things that we're seeing at the moment with the whole Vision 2030 and reform program that the Crown Prince has put forward 2 years ago is that involves, again, a rebalancing of the relationship between the religious establishment and the ruling family, a rebalancing that we do not know how that will work out in the end.
I see a point. Mr. Bouandel, Dorsey was saying basically that separating religion from politics in the Muslim world is just going to be a myth. But we're talking about huge issues at stake. We're talking about a region beset by violence, instability, regional conflicts, pitting key players like Saudi Arabia against the Iranians, Saudis, the UAE, Bahrainis, Egyptians against Qatar. There needs to be something to clamp down on the use of hate speech in this part of the world. How to do it?
Well, I would agree with James Dorsey about, when I talked about separation, it's almost impossible to do it. But what I was trying to say is that given the religious establishment has its own autonomy, and when it gives its opinion, it will be given on religious basis only. Because now, given the strong relationship between the two, I believe that so many religious figures in Saudi Arabia have taken up the arguments of the official political arguments, and whether they were under pressure to say so or not is yet to be seen. The second thing, as far as these particular laws are concerned, I believe it is extremely difficult to do because, the scripture is very, very clear. It doesn't take a genius or a very knowledgeable person about Islam to say that all the actions that were taken by the blockading states, especially in the holy month of Ramadan, are completely wrong. Families have been disrupted. Basically, I know of several people whose sisters, wives, whatever, are in the other side of the borders in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates.
Because of the sanctions that were imposed.
Because of the sanctions, they cannot travel there, etc., etc.
Okay. Mr. Qurashi, the problem with using religion is that for people it would mean that this is a religious duty for the people to take a stance in this conflict. But what happens when the two parties or the two rivals decide one day to reconcile their differences? I think it would be really difficult to sell it to people again and tell them, you know what, let's forget about what happened in the past and let's move forward.
Well, let me tell you a very important historical point, that all the Muslim empires, from the Umayyads, from the Spanish empire, Muslim empires, the Mughal empires, the Ottoman empires, they were all non-religious. Those empires survived on the basis of merit. Anybody who has got a talent, any religion, they never bothered about their religion. They inducted all these intellectual and intelligent people. Now, these countries which emerged after the Second World War in this in Middle East on a sand, as we say, and these 6,000, 7,000 kings and queens are already emerged, and then they have a problem in terms of, and the Saudi Arabia given the control of the holy places. Now, they do not own those places; they are just there for they happen to be there, and they never claimed that they own those places, but the Iranian narrative is that they want those cities to be declared as open cities. They want to follow their political agenda into it. So we need to keep a balance on this thing, that these two countries are fighting on a historical incident. And not the fight between Saudis and the Iranians is not religious. It is a fight on the basis of a historical tragic incident happened.
You say this is a political conflict, and let me include Mr. Dorsey. Mr. Dorsey, if you look at the map of the region, just the region on its own, we're talking about religion which is feeding or being used to feed a sectarian divide in Yemen, in Iraq, conflict in Syria, and the potential for a massive confrontation in the future with Saudi Arabia and its allies on one hand and Iran on the other hand. Isn't this a scenario that could just one day spin out of control and trigger a large-scale confrontation just because of the use of hate speech?
Absolutely, but I think that we're making a mistake by focusing narrowly on hate speech. It really is not about hate speech.
No, we made it, Mr. Dorsey, we made it clear this is a political thing that has been sort of manipulated.
Just allow me.
Go ahead.
Just allow me, if you will.
Go ahead.
What we're dealing with is interpretations of Islam or other religions, for that matter, that are not inclusive, not pluralistic, intolerant, and therefore, as a result, they do not look at other cultures, other sects within the same religion as having any validity. So I think that when we're talking about hate speech, we need to talk to it about within the context within which this is happening. It's not hate speech as such.
Mr. Bouandel, you've heard what Mr. Dorsey was saying, and basically this raises different issues at the same time, which is the respect of minorities, the ongoing political ambiguities, nuances between what is religious and political in this part of the world. But it raises again the same question that we started with: how to move forward, a reform of the religious establishment, or what is it? Because we need to see how to move forward.
I think that the way, it's very difficult to find a specific way forward. Like, I agree with your guest from Manila. It's basically the different interpretations of what Islam is, and the most important part of it, unfortunately, is exclusion. Basically, what George Bush said before: if you are not with us, you are against us. If your interpretation of Islam is not the way I see it, then you must be wrong. And this particular point serves only to feed more hatred and more disagreement. The way forward, I do believe that a political solution for the time being
will happen one day. So one last question, less than a minute. Mr. Qureshi, are you optimistic there will be a political solution to this crisis?
Well, there is a political solution for this crisis until the Saudi Arabians think Qatar is a new Kuwait for them. And then if they walk into Qatar, the consequences will be disastrous. And I think they should go back to the drawing board. They should start negotiations with each other. And they should start talking to each other and come out of this denial. And they should also be very careful about the people who were involved in mediation.
I see your point.
They're not a problem.
Thank you.
True mediators.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Less than 30 seconds. Do you think that these countries will be able to set aside their differences?
Ultimately, there will be a political solution. That doesn't mean that it will be speedy. That doesn't mean that it will solve the problem. And it doesn't mean that it will heal the wounds. It
would be really interesting to see how they would be able to go beyond the scars that were left behind by this ongoing crisis. Thanks to all our guests, Youcef Bouandel, James Dorsey and Shahid Qureshi. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the whole team here, bye for now.